My name is Brian Chamberlain. I'm 67. I started teaching in 1973, and the first school I taught at was Bewsey in Warrington, in which I did 1 year. I then went to Penketh and Sankey High School and did another year. Foolishly, I left to travel the world and didn't get very far and came back to Widnes. And my third school was St Fisher and Moore High School, which no longer exists. It was demolished in 1995, and I was at Fisher and Moore from 1975 to 94. And I took early retirement for various reasons. I'm a language teacher. I taught French and German, and during my career I eventually became head of year and head of French, and I retired as that head of French. Fisher Moore was a very well-known school in Widnes. Lots of things happened. People said it was a difficult school to teach in. I loved it. I loved the kids there. There were some funny moments. For example, there were many of them, but just to pick a few out of the air. Red Nose Day. I had a habit of marking the register and just shouting the name and ticking it, never looking up. I remember this particular morning, after I'd finished the register, it was coming to the end of registration, I looked up and every single one of them, 32, had a red nose on, and they were making funny faces. But that was typical of Fisher Moore, things that happened there. I had to retire. I didn't want to, but for reasons I had to, and I've missed it ever since. I absolutely love teaching, and we'll go back to it tomorrow. But people tell me now that things have changed radically from when I taught. A lot of teachers who went to Fisher Moore didn't last long in Fisher Moore. One teacher I know got hit over the head with a chair. One had a fight in the class, but for various reasons they left. One became a lorry driver, another a bus driver. He did actually. He lived in Blackpool and he drove buses. The sanctions we had, however, were totally different from nowadays. Up to, I think it was 83, we were allowed to use the cane. Personally, I detested using it, but I was, should I say, forced to in a way by the head of year. I was a form tutor in 4th year and it was a rough class. And one lad in particular, and I won't mention his name, was constantly in trouble. So every morning when I came in, various teachers say, Michael, his name was, Michael has been in trouble. In the end, the head of year came to me and he actually flipped a coin. He said, he's got to be caned. How are we going to do it? And he didn't want to do it. I knew that. So he flipped the coin, I lost, and he had to cane him. But what happened was I couldn't stop laughing afterwards. He wanted me to do it in front of the school, which was in the widest part of the main corridor, and it was a very long corridor in Fisher Moore School, and near the headmaster's office and the entrance. And cut a long story short, we were stood there and it was at break time, so the kids were going back and too. And I said, look, Michael, you know what you've been doing this and you've got to be caned. Yes, sir, yes, sir. And he put his other hand behind his back and held his hand out. Now, at that time, there was a famous programme on television. It was called Kojak, about a policeman. And he was constantly sucking lollipops, this Kojak, American policeman. Anyway, I caned him, tried not to hit him hard. His other hand came from behind his back and he stuck a lollipop in his mouth and said to me, who loves you, baby? Because that was what the policeman said in the American series. With being head of French, I was responsible for trips abroad, especially with the language department. And we organised one to Boulogne. It was an overnight stay on the ferry. by coach. Thankfully, I had the deputy head with me, who was a very well-known person in Widnes. His name was Peter Quinn, and the kids really weren't frightened of him, but they respected him, and me, hopefully. But we were on the ferry, and we thought we'd let them go around the boat and so on. And all of a sudden, because I'd put my name down as lead, I was in charge of it, over the microphone came, "Could Mr. Chamberlain please go up to the captain's cabin?" And I went up, and what the little horrors had been doing was pinching the butter out of the canteen, the butter pats, and greasing the stairs with them. And various people had gone, psh. Luckily none got hurt. So on that particular trip we had to herd them all round into one part of the ship and virtually sit on them till we got back. I had a pupil who I adored. He was a smashing lad and his nickname was Sparrow. I won't tell you his proper name. And he always sat at the front in facing me, registration, so he was in my form as well. And I remember one day, it was the winter and it was grey and dark and so on. And for something to say to him, I said, "Hey Sparrow," I said, the weather's going to change now, isn't it? And his answer was, "Yes, sir, I think it's going to piss down." Anyway, where it goes on this, he could be a real disruption in class. He didn't want to know French like a lot of them didn't. And I couldn't get away with this now, I'd probably be sacked. But what I did with him, because he was disrupting the class, was put him in my stock room with the Beano or the Dandy, which comics we had in those days. He went home and told his mother. I got a phone call from the deputy head a few days later saying, "Brian, you're wanted up at the office. Can you come up?" So I went up, walked through the door. This expletive came out and she threw a punch at me. It was his mother. I ducked and she hit the deputy head. When I said at the beginning that Fisherman was known as quite a rough school, I remember when I first went for the interview driving up the pathway, and I know the area but I'd never been to the school. And what first put me off was the fact that the top of the fences were all rolls of barbed wire like concentration camp. And half the windows were smashed. I found out later that the Widnes had lost that weekend, and that was often happened at the school. Anyway, I went in for the interview, and it was my first headmistress. Her name was Miss Dundon. She was a lovely woman. And went in, she offered me a cigarette, a polo mint, and virtually, not exactly the same way, just said, "Can you breathe?" I said, "I am doing." She said, "You've got the job." And that was my interview, more or less.